the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management to talk about what role Cornell can play in a broader set of issues having to do with evacuation or safety on the island. It is an issue that's beyond the scope of Cornell's ability to solve, but certainly our ability to get the attention of leadership at City Hall and have these conversations is really the role that we expect to play.
I think it needs to be addressed.
Okay. Next question. Yes, Barbara.
I was going to add something similar, so I want to follow up on that. I know it's not just your responsibility, but I remember way back when I worked for the New York State Department of State, we ran the coastal program, and you went with the feds to these up to the barrier islands. It's very scary. And I think the last flood, I know this is not a zone A, and it did, and you said you're elevating. Are you elevating enough? We know global warming, I think, is going to continue. And 25 years from now, we don't know what kind of hurricanes and what kind of floods we're going to have. And I agree there's other emergencies. And you, as this scientific institution, should help the City Hall and other people come up with some of these solutions.
We agree.
I mean, it's really scary.
We agree with that, and we're looking at a range of issues, not only raising the campus, we're looking, I think some people mentioned during the meeting, the possibility of cogeneration and bringing high-pressure gas onto the island. A cogeneration plant allows you to continue to generate electricity.
What's high-pressure gas for?
It just gives you a greater volume of gas so that you can take that gas and use it to generate electricity on the island locally rather than relying on a Connex grid, for example. So if the grid is inactive for whatever reason, you can continue to generate electricity and run buildings and shelters and that sort of thing. Again, it is a two-way street. Cornell has a lot of resources. We have a lot of people to think about this, and we're willing to bring that attention to the city. We hope to work with the city and the broader Roosevelt Island community on that.
Okay, Michelle?
Yeah, I have two comments. One is a follow-up on the safety issue and the evacuation of the island. A few years ago, or so, we had a transportation forum in which this was very, very seriously addressed and in a very broad way. And thank you. And one of the comments was that we were, of course, looking for other transportation venues to come on and off the island that could actually just be used as a matter of course of even usual circumstance. That was ferry, that was taxi, that kind of thing. One of the things that was brought up is the difficulty with implementing that because the island is so high. So in fact, that kind of public transportation, the fact that you're building so high, which mitigates other safety factors, and is probably a good thing to do, it might preclude alternative methods of transportation from your direct site. So I would just encourage you to look into that if you haven't already, and if you have a comment, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, two comments on that. One is that when we talk about raising the level of the campus, we're not raising the level of the roads, of the perimeter roads around campus. It's sort of crowning in the middle, and the ground floors of the buildings will be located much higher. I think on the broader issue, we have expressed an interest in working with people on the island and off to talk about ferry service and the opportunities for that. Again, thinking about some of the evacuation of Lower Manhattan following, let's say, the blackout a number of years ago, when the trains weren't working, ferry service was very effective at that. So we're certainly interested in working with a broader group to look at that issue.
If you can promote that with your expertise in cloud, that would be terrific. But the other point that was just a comment on that. What I wanted to ask you about, because it was raised, what is the long-term maintenance plan that you have for your area? I believe I understood correctly, that there are no tax dollars that are going to that. Roosevelt Island is a small community. It would be a very difficult thing to support by the people who live here. The rents, and I use that term very, very broadly, whatever the maintenance requirements are from the structures that you're building may or may not go to that. And do you pay taxes, and will that come back to us? So, and in terms of long-term maintenance of your property. Thank you.
So we've talked a few times about our obligation and our commitment to, certainly as we go through construction phases, doing things like repairing any damage we create. So we certainly feel a commitment and an obligation to do that. Universities in general don't pay taxes. I mean, one of the things that I think is very hard to understand, and as a resident, I totally understand where people are coming from and why this is a challenging concept. But universities are truly, even though we're large organizations, are not-for-profit. In our financial structure, we don't pay taxes, period. So even if we were in New York City, and not part of a state island, there would not be property taxes for an entity like Cornell. All that being said, that's why we're so focused on other ways we can really add a lot of value to the community, and we're certainly committed to doing that. Now, you also asked about maintenance, and certainly our obligation is to take care of our campus site in every way. So there will be security, there will be maintenance of the site, there will be maintenance of the buildings, and this will be a tremendous community resource. We talked about a few acres of open space, so in a lot of ways there is community benefit to something Cornell is paying for on the campus itself.
And the residential buildings are strictly university related?
The residential buildings are strictly university related. These are buildings that, if any of you work or have access to a university, a real challenge for your university in New York City is providing below market rate housing. Many of our population are students that don't have any income, and then we have a number of actually staff and others that have very low incomes. And so one of the things we really need to do to make this campus a success is to provide below market rate housing. It is a tricky financial model. We're really struggling with actually figuring out a way to make this work. So it will be, per our agreement with the city, it's limited to just campus people.
Okay, Roy?
I don't even know. Where are the mechanicals for the building? Are they in the basement, first floor, second floor?
How about that today?
We spent a lot of today looking at that. The answer is that roughly,
Where are the mechanicals for the building?
right, so we're in the process of designing the first building right now. I'd say about half of them are on the roof, and the other half are migrating up higher in the building. So we're very sensitive to the issue of making sure that the building is able to survive an incident, let's say a flood, and to be able to recover very quickly and move forward. So it's something that we're working on. We'd like to move all of the mechanicals up and out of any kind of a flood zone.
Ken?
The project is, I echo what most people say, the project is very interesting. I think it will add to the life of the island and also of New York City. I do have a couple of questions about the transportation and the parking, just to get the full texture, and some of the background materials were helpful in your presentation, but there were a couple of things that weren't clear. So it looks like in phase 1, you will have 250 parking spaces that will be new parking spaces that will be part of the project. Right?
In phase 1, there's the ability to build up to 250 parking spaces. It's not a requirement.
And then I know that at some point there's going to be conference center, educational center, / hotel, etc. So of the 250 that you're putting in, how, and then there's something about the public access to parking as well. How are you thinking about that? How are you envisioning that as between permanent residents, students, staff, etc., who might have permanent parking versus people who are coming for the conferences versus public people, and would you be charging the public, and what's the mix there?
That's a great question. Let me start by saying one of the reasons that Roosevelt Island was a very attractive community from a transportation perspective is because of the public transportation. So as we've talked about in the project description and through the EIS, there's a very strong reliance on public transportation as a means to get people to and from the campus. So when we look at other needs on the campus, let's say the corporate co-location or the executive education center, our goal is to have as little parking as possible. There is a belief that we buy into that the more parking you provide, the more cars you attract. So on the one hand, the more parking you provide, the worse of a problem traffic becomes. However, if you don't provide enough parking, then your facilities won't work. So what we're trying to do is work very closely with the corporate co-location program and with the executive education program to try to get right at that spot where it's enough parking to make it work, but it's not so much parking that it begins to attract more people who would only be driving, because we'd much rather have people come by public transportation. Yeah.
Yeah, let me just add something there. I mean, I'm an island resident, and this truly is a philosophical issue. Our goal is not to attract more cars to Roosevelt Island, and I think we're all collectively in agreement that that's probably a good thing. And so Andrew said it very well. The trick is we know we need to provide some parking. We will actually be adding publicly accessible parking on the road, because my understanding is now that it's permanent parking, and now presumably, this will be Riyadh's decision and might be open to the public. But as far as parking on the campus, we believe there will be a need for some parking, but we strongly believe that the more parking you offer, the more cars you will attract. And so it's a question of hitting that sweet spot. So what we included in the zoning is what we think is a very liberal amount of parking, and then we will be doing our best through education and treating this as a true urban campus to hit that right level as we build out over a course of years. And so it's up to 250 spaces in the first phase, and I believe another potentially 250 spaces down the road. Now, Allison, you have to help me on the numbers. The other thing to recognize is through the EIS, which is a very deliberate analysis, and we can all argue about some of the assumptions, but it's a good methodology. There is no parking issue based on the analysis, if I recall correctly, until the end of the full build-out, which is about 30 years. And at that time, I think we show an issue of about 45 space detriment, and this is before we build any parking. And so we're thinking 500 spaces is clearly, up to 500 spaces is clearly enough to accommodate any kind of parking demand.
Okay.
So I probably complicated things more, but.
Okay, Ed?
Just a couple of quick questions. As to, just on the powering of the project, is there any thought given to geothermal on that end?
Yes.
Yes, we are, sorry we didn't talk about it here. We're looking at geothermal energy to provide heating for the first academic building, yes.
Okay. My second question is just in terms of finance, will you be availing yourself of dormitory authority funding?
Unlikely in the first phase. Don't know about it. In the future, potentially, but not in the first phase.
Okay, and just finally, on the open space, I applaud you for setting aside 20%, 2 acres out of the total of 12 of open space. It's nice to see you doing that. My question is, because the project is 30 years in the making, what kind of open space will be available to people along the way? In terms of what I'm driving at is, will you be able to avail yourself of that at some point along the way, or are we going to have to wait 30 years before you get any of that open space?
You won't have to wait 30 years. It's actually written in the zoning. There are certain benchmarks in order to open up a certain amount of square footage on the campus. A certain amount of open space has to be provided. So the language is in the zoning. But we expect that the first major open space on the campus, the Grand Lawn, will be part of the first phase.
Okay, Marco, then I'll go to Luke.
First of all, this is my first time that I'm going to oppose in our side and support you. I read the resolution or the draft of the resolution very quickly, but I think they ask less what I often ask. And I think I'm in favor of the project, even though there is no real project coming. I agree absolutely with the words that Mrs. Dog said. They are going to build a spectacular campus, a world campus. I assume that this is going to be a really meaningful course. And I strongly support, and these words, it should be part of any resolution of this board. In addition, even your attorney mentioned something very interesting. They said it's going to be a fabulous architectural space. I would like to see to that. And finally, I would like to ask you, when you said you're going to become a leader of sustainability, which I applaud, I hope that you're not going to harvest and waste it. That's the only thing I would like to hear. Harvest, don't waste it. And finally, I should say about the public spaces. Public spaces, I think city planning, they have a very good regulations in that direction, POPs, which basically I would like to hear also from you that you're going to do even better than POPs, which answer a lot of questions from the community, because that is the minimum standard that you should provide for the community. And most of the answer will be right there. And if you offer better than that, that will be great. Thank you.
start with the last one, which is the POPs. I am not familiar with the details of the POPs regulations. Melanie may be able to speak to it, but within the zoning regulations themselves, there's extensive language and requirements for amenities, seating, certain planting levels, certain areas of social seating, movable seating, a whole series of regulations that city planning and we have agreed to make sure that the open space, I think somebody mentioned it during the comment period, that there's amenities and that there's an opportunity to develop open space that really is activated and that builds on the experience that the city has running parks. Is that?
I think that's absolutely right. And what we are including as part of the regulations for this is because it's this campus that has the opportunity for some great open green spaces. The one thing that we're really adding that's actually in addition to the basic POP standard is a requirement for a lot of landscape and a lot of green in the open spaces themselves.
And just I think to respond to one of your other points, which is about energy harvesting and being a leader in that, the first step in any sustainability plan is to reduce the usage of energy on campus. And so when we're looking at the first academic building, we're very concerned about the thickness of the walls, the insulation. We're looking at 60% opaque and 40% glazing. We're not talking about a glass building where heat is going to radiate out. We're looking at canopies to cover it so that it doesn't have sun heat gain. So before we start harvesting energy, our first job is to reduce our use of it.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Yes, how many, the population increase will be 50%?
We don't recognize that number. Based on the numbers in the EIS, the population increases somewhere in the neighborhood of 18%.
And how many of those are professors and how many students?
While we're waiting, I think it's also important to say, we didn't mention it in the presentation. The EIS, the basis of the EIS, assumes that the population of the island now does not include the hospital, the Goldwater Hospital. At the moment, we understand from HHC that the overall population, both in terms of patients and workers there, is somewhere in the order of 2,000 people who are living and working at that facility. So the EIS assumes zero in that facility. So from our perspective, even until Cornell builds up to 2,000 people on campus, there's more people on the island now on a daily basis working and living here than there would be as part of the Cornell campus. Do we have the number?
Yeah, the student population at full build, so we're talking about 2043, which is about when we peak, is about 2,500 students. And faculty is several hundred, 400, something like that. Remember, these are all graduate students. We're not talking about an undergraduate population. So somebody here mentioned things like dormitories. That's not what this campus is all about. We're talking about graduate students.
Well, where are they living? They're not going to be dormitories.
Apartments. Sorry, there will be residences, but it's apartments. Yes, residents.
So they're sleeping somewhere.
They're sleeping. Well, I don't know. Graduate students, I don't sleep much, but yeah.
One of the things that really does worry me is this is a small-ish island. I mean, the rest of it is slightly larger. And a huge institution. A huge institution, which I will support this plan. I'm very concerned about the demands on the community that will be made by this. I'm concerned about the parking spaces because I know that the zoning resolution goes from allowing them to permitting them to encouraging them because they can't quite get that right. But I think they haven't been in the zoning in the city. We haven't been all that correct in saying if there are no parking spaces, there will be no cars. If there are no parking spaces, there are double cars. So I just hope that will be a flexible number. If you find you're wrong, you could increase it or decrease it or whatever. And another question I had is the open space. Are any of those fields or soccer or playing fields in any way?
At the moment, we're looking at the first phase of the development of the campus. We're not looking at active sports fields. They're too big for the kinds of uses that we're expecting on the campus, we could consider that as a part of a future phase. But the current phase, what we're talking about, is really more of a passive open space.
And is there, I couldn't quite understand what provision you have for 24-hour accessibility during construction of somebody. Do you have somebody that they can call 24 hours a day, 365 days a year about a construction problem?
I'm not sure that we'll be on site 24 hours a day,
Will
but
that be in the phone now?
yes.
Okay. We'll go Larry, and then Jeffrey, and then Roy.
Quick question. It seemed as if tonight that the project was going to be spread over 3 phases, and the completion date was extended to 2043, and in your environmental analysis, you have a completion date of 2038. So could you explain maybe confusion on my part?
Sure. It's 2 phases. It's phase 1 opening in 2017. We're looking at the completion of the project in 2037. When I talked about 2043, that's what we consider a stabilized population. When you build an addition to the campus, it's going to grow over time in terms of attracting additional faculty and additional students. So when it opens, let's say in 2017, it won't be a fully populated 2017 campus. It'll take several years. So we say in 2023, that's when it's fully populated. As for the interim, we are looking, and it does talk about in the EIS, a phase 2A and a phase 2B, which talks about the completion of a middle phase around 2024 and in 2027, and then a final phase in 2037.
Jeffrey?
First, one comment and then a question, I guess. The one thing that I would like to say to the board that is not really touched upon in most of the presentations here is the concept of the commercial co-location. At the full build-out, commercial co-location, total square footage, including the Executive Education Center, will total 670,000 square feet. The academic center is 620,000 square feet. That component, commercial co-location component, is actually overshadowing on academic space, and it's one division in the draft EIS has been stated to be allotted to and to be developed by a third-party developer, not Cornell itself. And so, number one, I'd like to point out that concern because it's not one that's heavily touched upon in most of our presentations and our meetings with the community. And then I guess I'd like to ask Cornell to further extrapolate what their plans are for both the development of the corporate location and follow-up. I guess Elizabeth's point is that within the draft EIS and the explosion of growth, how that EIS addresses only addresses the academic population and does not seek to ameliorate or at least reconcile the increased population that comes with commercial co-location development. And so I'd like to be able to hear something about those points.
Sure, Allison and I want to talk about that, but the EIS does take into account it takes into account the entire population with the buildings as defined, so corporate co-location is very much accounted for in the population there. Corporate co-location is really critical to making this a successful campus. As you look at most successful campuses across the country, one of the things that's really important is that you mix activities and uses and people. This is a campus built on innovation, and so one of the things, because we are on an island especially, we need to be very deliberate about is attracting people in the tech sector to our campus. And there's a lot of interest in tech sector industry, venture capitalists, people that want to work with our students and our faculties in creating new businesses to actually be co-located with us. So you will not see a different kind of use in the corporate co-location building than you see in a lot of the academic building. As a matter of fact, Cornell is talking about taking some of the space in the first corporate co-location building. You're going to see people working together, researchers and students, researchers and companies, working with our students, offering workshops, offering planning sessions. It's a very compatible use, and we feel it's critical to the success of a campus like this. If you look at universities across the country, as I said, not just Cornell, but you look at MIT and Stanford, you look at Technion, who's our academic partner, you will see companies actually physically want to be located right by the campus, and it's for that reason. It's that energy between the two that make them so successful. So it's an important part of our campus, and it's one of the reasons why we're trying very hard to make that an important part of the first step of building this campus. We think we need it to activate the campus.
having a corporate park and you're having a hotel, I presume they would pay taxes.
The tax issue, yes. The tax issue is an issue we're talking to the city about, but right now those would be taxable entities, yes.
I also find it incomprehensible that you want to put 500 more parking spaces on the island. It seems to be most logical that you put those in Queens, forgive me, Queens. And you have a tram, or you have something else that brings the people to the island. And that is so common in so many campuses all over the country.
So I'm actually, may I repeat your question because I'm not sure everybody heard it, or your statement, tell me if I get it wrong, and then I'm actually going to agree with it. He said he said it's incomprehensible that we want to build 500 more parking spaces on the campus, and we don't. As what I was trying to explain not very well earlier on, is the zoning would allow us to build up to 500 spaces. Our goal is actually to build a minimal amount that's needed to take care of any kind of traffic that would be coming to the campus. I would love to see it fewer because we do not want to attract more cars to the campus.
Well, I suggest that we try to modify the zoning law to ban traffic, just to make it dramatic, and ban the parking.
Ban parking?
Okay, Alan?
I would like to move to vote on this issue on the next community board meeting
So you're making a motion, you're making a motion. Is it seconded?
No.
Okay, so the motion is to move, she's making a motion to hear this, to vote on this next week.
To continue
At
to
the full,
hear this,
at the full,
continue to discuss this, but to vote on it at the next meeting.
at the next meeting, and that, yes.
Which meeting are you?
The 24th is our deadline.
The 19th.
Yeah, but this is simply a motion, to vote on this issue, which precludes voting on it tonight, is what you're saying.
That's correct.
Right, so that's the motion, it's been seconded, and were you going to
What
speak?
do you think, please?
What's that?
I would like to take a question.
No.
Does that,
What's that? Yeah.
what information?
Yeah, okay.
Does that mean that this is to continue on? with
The motion is to,
If the motion is accepted and going on, does that mean that we continue this on for the next hour or two with the questions?
it means, what it means is that we won't vote on this tonight. Questions can continue, discussion can continue, but there won't be a vote tonight, it'll be pushed to the 19th.
Well, why can't we go to tonight? It's not.
But that's the motion. That's the motion. So it's been seconded, so Ellen has the floor. Ellen?
So I'd like to give you the reason why I think that it needs to be moved. We need time, Cornell needs time. There have been questions that have been raised tonight by the community that have not yet been answered, and Cornell needs some time to put those in writing to us. There's also questions that we're asking, and the committee needs time to deliberate a little bit more. I handed out, for most of you who got this, I handed out kind of like a rough draft of some questions that are not yet in the resolution that we made. This resolution was done very quickly on things that have been studied for months, and Cornell has been working really hard. I think we owe them a fair chance to get, a good pass by us if we get the right answers from them. So we need some extra time. We need at least another meeting of the committee. We need at least some extra time for the committee to put my suggestions into the resolution in a well-considered format, and just in general, we need more time. So, anybody else?
I agree. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll work our way over. We'll go Jane, then we'll go Patrick, and then we'll go Jeffrey. Jane?
I just want to know how long the agenda is for next Wednesday, because don't we have a presentation by Memorial Sloan Ferry? Or
No, we have New York Hospital is on the agenda right there. That's a land use item, correct?
BSA application.
That's a BSA application that we're going to hear next week. And then we'll have all the committees that will be reporting as well. What's our time? Do we have a time limit?
6 committees.
What's that?
No, it's 6 committees that'll be.
6 committees, and then do we have a time limit to get out of the building or not?
I don't think so, but I'll.
Okay, all right.
Mike, will there be continued discussion? Will it be a public hearing next week or just?
Well, there's a public session, okay, so anyone can speak in the public session. Most likely, if the way we would handle it is that we would not have the public comment like we did here tonight, but if someone wanted to show up and speak, I can't, we can't say we can't speak, but we would, depending on how many people came out, we would probably limit the public session also. So it would be, it would be truncated, we'll put it that way. Okay, so we have Patrick, right, and I said Jeffrey, right, and then Larry, and then we'll go Terry, yes. I'm working my way over.
My concerns are basically administrative and operational as far as the community board is concerned. And internally, here on Roosevelt Island, as far as we are concerned. Personally, I think that the university's thing is the greatest thing since Paulo here. I really do. I think that the number of details are mind-boggling. That everybody and his brother has got a saying in this. There has seemed, and that's not bad, there seems to me to be, however, one absent voice, and that is the state of New York, by way of the Roosevelt Island Operating Committee. Corporation, excuse me. Where have they been? And I have not heard anything on that. I have not read anything on that. And they, in fact, the Operating Corporation, will be representatives of the state of New York. So, that's my concern.
Jeff, I'll let Jeffrey go with the order.
Just to support Ellen's point, Larry and myself, along with David, Nick, all worked on the draft report in which there are resolutions that we've put forward. Having said that, even up until the last minute of today, the reason why there was not a vote taken, why there was not a recommendation from the committee taken, is because there were so many outlying points in which we were either consolidating our language or set forth or taking into further concerns. The same sentiment that Ellen has professed here tonight is the same that we all expressed a desire to continue, the committee continue so that we can take a vote on the 19th. But we had agreed to at least provide a draft report of the resolutions therein, in case the body itself had sought to progress further and take a vote on it. So in any case, it's not as if the committee has not done its duties. It's one in which we want to be able to clarify and present a true resolution that would normally come out of the task force, that a vote would be taken, so that you as a committee would understand the members' positions, and it would be a clear resolution that would be able to set forth on the next.
Okay. Terry? Yeah, because they can't hear you in the back, Terry.
First of all, I wanted to say how exciting the prospect of having two major universities like and Cornell coming to New York City, both universities having the foresight to make that kind of decision. I think Technion is actually 100 years old this year, founded, I believe, in 1912. Not many people realize that, but it's renowned throughout the world. So having said that, this is an unusual, which people can see, a unique situation where you have a blank slate. It's not unlike how Roosevelt Island, the other side of Roosevelt Island, was developed. It's a blank slate. And you have a master plan and long-range planning, which is part of this equation, as opposed to the institutions on the other side of the river on Manhattan Island, which just developed in an unrestrained manner, uncontrolled. The words master plan and long-range planning don't seem to compute. So I'm very envious of your planning abilities here. Having said that, I do have some concerns because I was listening to what the residents said, and some of them said they asked questions, and one of the answers was, well, frightening response because no major institution, whether it's in New Haven, Cambridge, Palo Alto, you name the institution, Ithaca, can operate independent of the surrounding community. It's impossible. Some of them have learned the hard way. So I would try to answer that question very quickly, because this is moving forward very, very quickly. The other question I have, and when you say you're building higher, how this kind of development can go forward without attention to the seawall. The whole issue of the seawall on Roosevelt Island has been like a basketball game. It's a ball that gets tossed and back and forth between New York City, the state, Roosevelt Island. It's on land owned by the city of New York. So what are you going to do to repair the eroded areas of the seawall or improve the seawall? Maybe not just on your end of Roosevelt Island, but looking around the island.
The seawall is just not part of the Cornell property. We're totally inward of the road. We're not even close to the seawall.
That's what I'm saying. That's the kind of answer.
I completely understand that. And as newest members of the community,
you could provide that kind of mitigation.
we are more than willing as the newest members of the community and as I grant large members of the community to work with the community to find these solutions. But this is an ongoing issue, and there are many others on the community. We're just going to have to work with everybody else to fix this.
All right. I'm going to go to people who haven't spoken. Yeah, so who do we have that hasn't spoken? Scott, and I'll work my way back. Scott?
I basically want to just address the parking issue because one of my concerns has been about whether there are too many spaces. You're going to end up encouraging cars, as you have yourself mentioned. And I think the trend of the city has been away from parking minimums in the parts of the city that have had parking minimums in zoning. You know, the city is trying to avoid encouraging it, and I think it's especially difficult. The repercussions if you inadvertently do encourage cars to come to the campus, it's a much worse effect than it would be somewhere else. So I really applaud your instinct that you want to try to, while covering what's needed, not in any way encourage it.
Here's what we're going to do, and I'll let them answer that, but I'm going to limit the questions right now to the motion that's on the floor. We'll deal with that, and then we can go back to the questions that people have, okay? So if you want to answer that, go
seems
ahead.
like more of a statement, and again, we recognize that there are people on both sides of this issue, but the trend we've seen at city planning, particularly in dealing with issues even outside of Manhattan, let's say Brooklyn and Queens, is to reduce the percentage requirements of parking across the board, and we agree with that.
Okay, so we're going to go to the motion that's on the floor. Before we call to question, one thing I'm going to bring up here is that with regard to that issue, we do have this is important, we do have a commitment to the Roosevelt Island community and to, we sent a letter to Assemblyman Kellner, and I'll read the letter. He had requested that we hold every meeting that we have regarding this issue on Roosevelt Island. And it says basically that my response was that I agree with you on an issue so important to the residents that the CBA meeting should be held on Roosevelt Island. I plan to hold all meetings related to the Cornell project on Roosevelt Island unless unforeseen circumstances prevent us from doing so. So that's the letter. Just want the board members to be aware of what our position was in terms of having meetings here. And I guess what's that?
Can Tony say something, please?
Yeah, I'll let him in a second. Okay. It's important to know because we've taken that position. So the board members need to consider that. But I put a clause in there basically saying unless unforeseen circumstances prevent us. The other thing that I'm going to ask is from the residents, a show of hands of an objection if we hold a meeting on Manhattan Island. Is how many people would object to holding a meeting on Manhattan Island? So if how many people would object if we hold this meeting next week on Manhattan Island? We don't have, let me put it this way, we don't have a choice where we're going to hold this meeting next week. It must be in Manhattan. It's been scheduled. The meeting is a full board meeting. It's been posted. It's been on our calendar. I can't take that meeting hear it in that manner. I don't have a choice in that matter. But what I am saying is that I want to see if there's an objection from the community if we did lay this over or push this over to next week. Are there people who feel we should hear it tonight, or that we should not hear it in Manhattan? So how many people would be opposed to us hearing it next, or voting on it? Put it this way, voting on it next week.
No objection.
Is there objection from anyone about us voting on this next week?
No objection.
No objection. Okay, just note that for the record, please. I want to be on the record as that. We made a commitment to that, and I take that very seriously. Okay, so I'm going to go to Larry, and then I'll work my way, and then I'll work my way down.
I want to call the question.
Second.
Okay.
The motion's been
called. The question has been seconded.
The motion is to postpone.
Do I get a final statement?
No, we're going to go by Robert's rules.
Can I do a point?
Yes.
I think this is close to a point being made.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure everybody understands, in the community, that we have to vote on it next week, even if we don't have.
Let me make that clear. Yeah, but so here's the thing. We have a deadline of the 24th. The way this process works is that we're told that by the 24th we have to weigh in. If we wait beyond that period, then our opinion doesn't count. We don't, or we essentially, we can say whatever we want on January 5th, but it won't be part of this process, okay? So that's some people raise that issue saying, well, why don't you wait longer and you can get more information? We have to take a position one way or the other on this, okay? We can choose not to take a position, but then we won't be counted when this during this whole process. So just want to make that clear. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to tell you. So the motion that was made was that we should vote on this issue next week, not vote on it tonight. That's the motion, simply put, right, Ellen? Okay, it's been called question. Please call. All those in favor of calling the question? Aye. Opposed? Call the roll, please.
Ashby.
Abstain.
Austin. Yes. Faruco.
Abstain.
Bartos. Abstain. Birnbaum.
Yes.
Blaney.
Yes.
Bondi. Boards.
Yes.
Breslin. Carmen.
Yes.
Chucky.
Yes.
Kleins.
Yes.
Escobar.
Yes.
Evans Corey.
Yes.
Falk.
No.
Hughes. Hatzell.
Yes.
Pepper.
Yes.
Cockett.
Yes.
Horn. Johnson.
Pass.
Liston.
Yes.
Minerva. Parnes.
Yes.
Horsham.
Yes.
Pike.
Yes.
Pallavi.
Yes.
Popper. Popper.
Rita.
Popper.
Yes.
Price.
Yes.
Wanstrom.
Yes.
Rother.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Slater.
Yes.
Stewart.
Yes.
Tamayo, yes. Diaz.
Yes.
White. Board.
Yes.
Okay, listen.
Johnson.
I think yes.
Johnson.
It passes, right? Okay, so that passes. So the vote will not take place tonight, but we will continue discussion. We'll go back to people who have not. Anybody has spoken yet?
We're meeting next week.
Yeah, so we're meeting next week. It's at the 9, is that 9 Hill? And the address, can I read out the address we have?
20 East 92nd Street.
What is it?
20 East 92nd Street.
20 East 92nd Street. Okay. The meeting starts at 6:30. There will be a public session. Depending on how many people are there, the amount of comment time could be 1, 2, or 3 minutes. And I'm going to ask people who are speaking on this issue to limit their comments in sort of a certain amount of time, simply because unless it's something new that we have not heard.